Hi, I'm Bill from CJ Pony Parts. Ever since the 2015 Mustangs arrived, we've been working hard to bring you the best installation videos around. That way, when you order your parts from CJ Pony Parts, not only are you getting the right parts, we're also showing you how to install them. So far for the 2015, we've shown you cold air kits, suspension upgrades, wheels and tires, and several different exhaust system options. Speaking of exhaust, the one video we requested most by our viewers is how to install long tube headers. So today, we're going to show you how to install a set of American Racing headers on our 2015 Mustang GT. We know the reason a lot of people are asking about the long tube header installation is right here. For 2015, the catalytic converter is actually part of the manifold on the driver's side. So to replace the cat with like a high flow or an off-road, you can't use a conventional H-pipe or X-pipe like in previous models. You have to replace the entire manifold or start cutting and welding to do so. So by doing a long tube header, it fixes this problem, along with adding a lot more horsepower and torque. On previous models, your long tube headers would end right around in this area here. The problem with the 2015 is nobody wants to keep this factory resonator. It's heavy and it's restrictive. American Racing actually took a very unique approach by building in an X-pipe system to their long tube headers, which we're going to show you. The American Racing headers we've installed on previous model Mustangs have always been really high quality. We've had great results out of them. The 2015 Mustang is no different. The whole system is 304 stainless steel. It starts off with a 3/8 inch thick laser cut flange through a set of 1 7/8 inch primaries, ending up in a merged collector with a scavenger spike. From there, our particular system, we went with the high flow catalytic converter, which goes through a true X-pipe and then flows back here into the tailpipes. This whole system up to this point is going to be 3 inches. At this point here, you'll notice where there's a little cutoff where a clamp's going to go. You can actually run this with a stock exhaust. You can cut your factory tailpipes right here and run a factory exhaust system with it. In our case, we're going to finish it off properly and go with American Racing Headers axle back system. It features mandrel bent 2.5 inch pipes through a stainless steel muffler, ending in a 4 inch polished stainless steel tip. While the American Racing Axleback is the perfect complement to this system, you actually can run it as well with a Ford Racing Axleback or a Roush Axleback. American Racing Headers includes everything necessary for installation, including new header bolts, new gaskets, clamps, and O2 sensor harness extensions. For this installation, need a lift with a pole jack or a jack and jack stands, 1/4 inch ratchet, 3/8 ratchet, 1/2 inch ratchet, cordless impact gun, 3/8 swivel, E8 reverse Torx bit or 1/4 inch bit, T40 Torx bit, 10mm socket, 13mm socket, 14mm socket, 15mm deep socket, lots of extensions totaling at least 30 inches, 15mm wrench, 14mm wrench, 13mm wrench, O2 sensor or 7/8 wrench, flashlight, and safety glasses. We're going to start the install by putting our car up in the air and removing the factory exhaust system. On previous models, a lot of people ask, can you do this in your driveway? Yes, you can. The header install actually can be done on the ground. Is it harder? It is, but you can do it. We're going to start removing these 2 bolts with the rear hangers. We're going to remove these 2 bolts here. The hangers are actually hooked into the subframe so they won't come off. Next step is to loosen the clamps at the front of the resonator. For the next step to get the whole cat back off, you will want to get some help because of the size and weight of it. Before you do that, you pull these little hooks off here. That will allow the system to drop. What you'll do is you'll slide the sleeves off the front. Allow it to drop down and then just walk it off the rear hanger. Just hold it back up again. Hold it wide, there you go. There you go. Before you put your stock system aside, grab these 2 hangers. You will need them for your new system. This is not necessary, but we're going to remove this pipe just to give us a little more room to work. On the passenger side, the catalytic converter will separate from the manifold, so we're going to remove the nuts to do that next. Only this nut is accessible from underneath the car. You can get to this one, but there's no room to turn it, so we have to get this one from up in the engine bay. Like I said, the other nut you have to get from the top. What I found that you need about a 30-inch extension to get it. You can try going from the engine bay and fishing it down. I've actually found it's easier sometimes to put the socket on the nut from underneath and fish the extension upward. go. We'll get it seated on the nut, and we can go up top and remove it. We'll attach our ratchet. What you want to do here is get it loose. You don't want to take it all the way off. If you take it all the way off, the catalytic converter is going to fall off. So get it so it's nice and loose. Then when we go back underneath the car, we'll move everything. While we're in the engine bay, we're going to disconnect the battery as well. We're going to be messing with the starter and a bunch of sensors. For safety's sake, just disconnect it. To give yourself some more room underneath, you want to go underneath the dashboard and disconnect this metal plate. There's two nuts to hold it on. Once you disconnect it, that'll allow you to move the steering column a little bit out of the way underneath, give us more room for the header. Before you remove the pipe, you want to reach up here and disconnect the oxygen sensor for the rear. Now we can start the header on the passenger side. To do that, we're going to move the motor mount bracket, and the starter to give us as much room as possible. Before we move the motor mount, we do have to support the engine. The way we do it is from the corner of the oil pan. And I'm sure you've been told never jack the car up by the oil pan. That's true. You don't want to put it in the center. But if you put a block of wood in the corner and distribute the weight, you'll be fine. The motor mount is held to the body, 2 bolts here, and a third one up top behind the starter. Once you get the bottom 3, there's another one that's hidden in the back that works as a ground. There's a nut first. Once you remove the nut, there's another bolt underneath. Now that the bracket's out of the way, we're going to remove the motor mount as well, again, just to give us a little more room in there. Set them by 2 bolts, one back here and another one in the front. Once the bolts are out, you pull the mount out of the way. I'm going to warn you now on camera, that's going to look a lot easier than it actually was. Ford puts a heavy amount of Loctite on these 2 bolts from the factory, making them very difficult to remove. Sometimes it is easier to get them from the top of the long extension as opposed to using a ratcheting wrench from below. Next, we'll remove the starter. What you want to do first is remove the wiring from the starter. Pop that cover off. There's a nut on both sides of these 2 wires here. Make sure your battery is disconnected before you mess with the starter. It's going to be 3 bolts you need to remove your starter. One pretty easy to get to on the top here, one not too bad on the side, and one that's pretty tough to see on the top. Now you can see the factory header and all the nuts we have to remove from the factory studs. At this point, pretty much there are no tricks. Just got to find the right combination of wrenches, ratchets, whatever you need to get in there, get those nuts loose, and get the header off the car. All right, once you have all the nuts off, you're going to reach up, disconnect the O2 sensor. Push that down and remove the header. We have the header removed now. You can see the factory studs. In previous installs, we were actually able to salvage the studs and reuse them. We found with this header, with this body though, there's just not enough room with the studs in place, so you do have to remove them. You want to be careful. When you remove the stud, what you want to do is thread it out and kind of thread it back in a couple times. We found with the shoulders on the studs, when they get tightened down from forward, sometimes that shoulder gets up against the thread. You'll have a hard time getting a bolt in there. So you want to do that, remove all the studs except for the very front one, which we're going to show you next. We're going to leave the top stud in the front for a couple different reasons. For one, it makes it easier to put the header on that stud and hold it in place via the bolts. The other main reason though is it's the hardest one to get to. So to get a bolt in over that stud in with the air conditioning lines would be very difficult. By keeping the stud, it gives us something to work off of. It makes it a little bit easier to get the hardware installed. Now we'll put the gasket up into place. The kit includes gaskets. You can use the new gaskets or use the factory ones. Now you can fit the header up into place. Once you have the corners in place, then you're going to go back through and install the rest of the bolts. This part will take some time. Some of the bolts are tough to get to. You can't get a wrench on them really easily, but take your time and you get to all 8 of them, tighten them down, we'll move on to the other side. The bottom bolts you can get to with a ratchet and a socket. The top ones you will need a ratcheting wrench. Once everything's tight, we're going to do the opposite of what we did to take it apart. Put the starter back on, put the mount back on, then move on to the driver's side. To start the driver's side, make sure your steering wheel is locked and it doesn't move. At that point, you'll loosen the bolts here, so we disconnect the steering shaft, just move it out of the way to give us a little more room. Now we're ready to install the driver's side header. Just like the passenger side, before you install it, make sure you grab all the bolts you're going to be using and thread them in. It's very important to make sure you thread them in straight and cleanly so you don't damage the head. Just like on the passenger side, we're leaving the one front stud to make it easier to get it up into place, and we're going to put a bolt in the back. Now we have the headers mounted, we're going to remove all of our oxygen sensors from the factory pipes and move them over to our new pipes. We're going to start here with the driver's side, take off the front sensor and then the rear sensor. Make sure you keep them separate. You want to put them right in the factory locations where they came. So keep the right front in the right front, left front, and so forth. Like always with an O2 sensor, put a little anti-seize on it and be very careful to thread it in straight when installing it in the header. Now we'll connect our front O2s. In the case of the driver's side, this original clip can be used. Just carefully slide it down the wire. Clip it back up here. I want to carefully tape this up out of the way. At this point, we can start working on the rest of the exhaust system. We'll start by installing both catalytic converters. They're not side specific, so grab whichever one you have, and a clamp and put it up into place. At this point, we're just going to put everything together loosely, and we'll come back and tighten later. Now I can put the mid pipes on. Now at this point here, this is where you would install your, if you had a factory exhaust you're running, this is where you would cut the factory exhaust. If you're running any kind of another aftermarket axle back that required cutting, you have to cut here and then cut where the muffler went on as well. The American Racing system is actually perfectly designed, plugs right into this. Install the clamp first. Make sure you have the 2.5-inch clamps. It does come with 2.5-inch for the back and then 3-inch for everything up front. Put the factory hanger on. I'm gonna go back through, line up everything, and start tightening it down. And now repeat the process on the other side. Once everything's tightened down, we'll reinstall the bolts for the rear hangers. Once the pipe's in place, now we can install the rear O2 sensors. I'll plug in the rear O2 sensors. These also come with extensions. We found these reach pretty easily. If it is too tight though, just use the extension. And the last part of the installation is to install the tips. Just line them up where you're straight, where you want them, and then tighten them down. You want to make sure you reconnect the plate on your firewall. Come up here, hook up our battery. Reinstall the cover and our installation is finished. We know this is the part you're waiting for, so let's fire it up, see how it sounds. Wow, that is very loud, very aggressive sounding exhaust. It's very crisp. When you get on it, I mean, it's got a real raspy tone, but it's real tight and real crisp. The American Racing long tube headers teamed up with their axle back is probably the most aggressive sound I've heard so far in 2015 Mustang. This thing sounds killer, and keep in mind this is with catalytic converters, so this car is still emissions legal. If you go with an off-road pipe, it'll probably sound even better. Overall, the installation will take you some time. Depending on where you read on the internet, some people have said anywhere between 2 hours and 2 days to do long tube headers. Give yourself the better part of a weekend. There's a lot of work and it is time consuming, but take your time, get some help, and you'll be back on the road in no time.